RFK Racing has formed a technical alliance with RFK Racing. Hailie Deegan's future is uncertain for 2023, and the RTA is talking about having exhibition races that could lead to a NASCAR split. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start off by talking about Matt Gressy. As it was announced a couple days ago that Matt Gressy has been promoted to CEO at Nashville Superspeedway. Matt Gressy had been working as one of the higher-ups at Nashville Superspeedway with Eric Moses now working at the Rose Bowl. Matt Gressy is going to take over. Wishing Matt the best of luck. Hopefully do a really good job as CEO and can help Nashville Superspeedway grow as a racetrack going in the future. Good luck to him because he's going to need it. Hopefully he'll do a really good job there. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Trackpass International. As reported by Jonathan Field, that Trackpass International will not return in 2023. Very disappointing news to hear. This will affect the Canadian and Mexican audiences, so that is really disappointing to hear. I'm hoping this means they're working on some sort of service for basically for every country at this point, because this is very disappointing to hear that Trackpass International will not be returning in 2023. Very disappointing news. I'm not a big fan of this. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Josh Berry. As Josh Berry won his 100th race at Junior Motorsports across the late model starts, the Cars Late Model Tour races, and the Xfinity Series. He was able to do that by winning the Thanksgiving Classic at Southern National Motorsports Park. Josh Berry, an awesome late model driver, also of course driving the 8 car for Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He has done an incredible job racing late models and a great job racing. And for him to get his 100th win with Junior Motorsports is absolutely phenomenal. In that legendary number 3 car, that throwback scheme that they ran in that late model race, that was exciting to see. So congratulations to Josh Berry on winning his 100th race at Junior Motorsports, a massive accomplishment for him. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Osbar. As it was announced yesterday that Carson Osbar is going to enter the 2022 Gateway Dirt Nationals. Now, this means that Carson Osbar has withdrawn from the Snowball Derby, because he was actually supposed to run the Snowball Derby, but he'll now be racing at the Gateway Dirt Nationals in my hometown in St. Louis. Really excited to see that Carson Osbar is doing more late model races. It's going to be really fun to see him at Gateway Dirt Nationals. I won't be there at the Edward Jones Dome, unfortunately, for that event. That's an event that I've been trying to get out to for the last couple of years, but for him to run the event is exciting, and he's going to bring some starstruck out to the event. Really exciting to hear, and happy to see he'll be entering the Gateway Dirt Nationals. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chandler Smith. As it was announced yesterday or a couple days ago that Chandler Smith has withdrawn from the Snowball Derby. Chandler Smith, I believe, won last year's Snowball Derby, so very disappointing news here. He will not be entering the Snowball Derby. There are personal reasons that I'm not going to get into, but it's very disappointing that one of the best drivers in the history of the Snowball Derby will not be entering the Snowball Derby in 2023. It's 2022, I should say. Chandler Smith, if he would have raced, would have probably been one of the favorites, because he's a really awesome driver, and it's good to see when drivers get to race. When they don't get to race, it's very disappointing, but I understand his decision. Spending time with his family makes a lot of sense, but it's very disappointing news that Chandler Smith has withdrawn from the Snowball Derby. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Nashville Fairgrounds. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Monday morning that, according to him, the National Fair Board has set 2 meetings to discuss Bristol Speedway Motorsports proposals for renewal. Run Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. The first is a workshop for board members to discuss the proposal. That is actually happening today. The second meeting, which is the first open meeting, is going to take place on December the 8th. Obviously, you've been following this story around the Nashville Fairgrounds. You've been following that basically the National Fair Board, they are trying to get a proposal in Bristol, is basically trying to get approval to run the Nashville Fairgrounds so the NASCAR Cup Series can return. Now, the earliest if this does end up getting approved, because of course there's still a lot that needs to be done for this to get approved, but they have a plan, and the plans, in my opinion, look really good. It would basically mean that we would have alternate years of having NASCAR Cup Series races in the Nashville area. And basically, if you have races in the Nashville Fairgrounds, you'd be able to have them right smack dab in the city. NASCAR has been trying to get out to like the Las Vegas Strip, as has been reported last week, and they're trying to get out to being in more of the central locations in the city. Whenever this does get approved, if it does get approved, I think that this is going to be really massive and really really big for the sports. So hopefully this does get approved, but there's more meetings happening in the future, and we'll see when those meetings happen how big those will be. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about William Byron. As William Byron basically announced last weekend on Wednesday that he will be entering the 2022 Snowball Derby. William Byron has entered a lot of late model races in the last year or two, and a majority of the late model races that he's entered, he's actually went on to win. So if you're going to be putting a betting odds, I would think that William Byron has a very good chance to win the Snowball Derby. He's actually my pick to win the Snowball Derby because of the fact he's got a lot of late model experience, has been really good late models this year, and every time he's entered a late model race, he has generally won. So if you're looking at a favor going into the Snowball Derby this year, you've got to look at William Byron as the favorite. But it's very exciting to see that he's entering the Snowball Derby, and hopefully he can go out there and win the Snowball Derby. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about RLL Racing, which is Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. As it was announced on Wednesday that Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing will be having some number changes in 2023. Graham Rahal is going to stay in the 15 car in 2023, but there will be some swapping between Jack Carvey and Christian Lundgaard. Christian Lundgaard will be moving away from the 30 car and move over to the 45 car, and Jack Carvey will be moving over to the 30 car. Now, I believe that both Jack Carvey and Christian Lundgaard is a contract year for both of those drivers, so they're both going to have to step up and improve. Christian Lundgaard, near the end of the season, he really started to show a lot of progress and a lot of speed near the end of the year, while Jack Carvey really struggled. They're hoping with these changes that they can improve and make the organization a lot better going into next season. And they're going to need it, especially under a contract year. So hopefully they can do well enough to go out there and contend, and hopefully we'll see them improve in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mateo Bennetto. As it was announced yesterday that Mateo Bennetto has officially resigned as team principal at Ferrari. Mateo Bennetto has been the team principal for Ferrari for the last couple of years, and it's been kind of a controversial figure. Well, I think Mateo Bennetto has been a key reason of why Ferrari has shown up in the speed the last year, especially with the regulations that come out this year. I think he's been a big factor to why the team really showed up with a lot of pace this year. He's been a big problem when it comes to the strategy calls. He's kind of behind some of those strategy calls and basically said there was a lot of strategy problems when there were a lot of strategy problems. Don't get me wrong, like I said, Mateo Bennetto really helped Ferrari get back up the pace and speed, but there were a ton of strategy calls that were just absolutely awful, and it's what cost Ferrari the championship, because there were a lot of races here where Ferrari probably should have won, and they lost because of terrible strategy calls or crashes or something that really happened to the team. So I feel kind of for Mateo. Don't get me wrong, there is some talk he could go to another organization. There's apparently four or five different teams that might be wanting him as a team principal, because there's some changes coming over at some organizations, but I don't know who's going to end up signing him. That being said, though, congrats to Mateo on a great career at Ferrari as the basically team principal, and congrats on wherever he ends up. I wish him the best of luck. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about wheels coming off. Now, there was a fellow Twitter user, NASCAR Family Man, I believe, who asked a question to Bob Pockers about if there's any changes this coming when it comes to the wheels falling off. Well, Bob Pockers responded and said that NASCAR is discussing to make the penalty change for the wheels coming off on the single limits of the cars. They're talking about maybe an in-race suspension, or we're basically in-race penalties, or maybe just a shorter suspension. If this ends up coming true, it's to be termed, by the way, but if it ends up coming to fruition where NASCAR does decide to limit how long the penalties are, I 100% agree with the decision. Look, I understand that the wheels coming off these cars, especially with how big the wheels are, can be extremely dangerous. But we saw this year 24 or 25 times at least this year where wheels ended up coming off. Now, NASCAR did make some changes to the wheels coming off throughout this year, but they still had the 4-race suspension. I understand why they have in the Trucks Xfinity Series, because they have 5 lug nuts. But with the Cup Series, you have 1 single lug nut. And we found out that some of the guns were having major issues and malfunctions that were causing some of these problems. So I think that's why NASCAR is talking about this, and I hope that this does come to fruition, that they can fix some of these problems, because I do think that there are problems in this area. I hope that NASCAR can figure out a solution to this, because they need to figure out a way with single lug nut rules. I know F1 has some ways they do it, but the same token, same time, they need to figure out a solution to this problem, because it is a major problem, and I hope that they are having good discussions about this for 2023. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. As Front Row Motorsports on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, announced some 2023 changes to their leadership positions. Now, they have not announced their drivers for 2023, which I'll discuss here in a second. So, Travis Peterson is going to be moving away from basically being one of the higher-ups at RFK, and he will be crew chiefing the number 34 car in 2023. Seth Barber, who's been the crew chief of the 38 car for the last few years, will become the technical director of Front Row Motorsports. And Ryan Burgundy, who's been the car chief for the number 34 car, has been promoted to performance director at Front Row Motorsports. Now, Travis Peterson does have a little bit of crew chief experience, and he has some decent runs as a crew chief, so hope he can do better, as good as he can, because I don't know if this is going to be the same magic that we saw with Blake Harris. But the hope is that this move can really help the team going into 2023. Now, the big question is going to be when it comes to Front Row Motorsports is who will return to Front Row Motorsports in 2023? Well, I have some potential drivers, and I think it's going to be the same two guys that have driven for Front Row Motorsports, that being Michael McDowell and Todd Gillen. Michael McDowell had a career year at Front Row in 2022. Despite not winning a race, he had like 2 or 3 top 5s, like 11 or 12 top 10s, which is more than some drivers could say in 2022. Michael McDowell really helped the team become a very solid team and nearly had a top 20 season going. Outside of that 100-point penalty, they had a great year. Todd Gillen, I also expect return to 38 car. Todd Gillen, I think, had an okay rookie year for his standards. He did better than Anthony Alfredo did, I should say. I know there's been some changes to the 38 car, but I think that Todd Gillen is going to return to Front Row in 2023. Regardless, though, I really love some of these changes they're making and hopefully help Front Row become a more solid team heading into the 2023 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cole Custer. Now, Cole Custer, we obviously know, is going to be moving back down to the Xfinity Series, as he will not be driving the 41 car in the Cup Series in 2023. So he'll be driving a second Xfinity Series car. What is that number going to be? Well, as no surprise and as expected, he'll be driving the 00 car once again in 2023 in the Xfinity Series. Now, as for those of you who need a background, Cole Custer, for most of his career until he got to the Cup Series in 2020, drove the 00 car. He won a lot of races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in that 00 car and won a couple Truck Series races when he drove for Junior Motorsports and Stewart-Haas Racing and the Camping World Truck Series. Cole Custer, if you're looking at favorites, he has to probably be one of the few favorites going into the 2023 season because of his Cup Series experience. And I think that Cole Custer needed to be moved back down to Xfinity. I think he definitely should have had a shot at Rick Ware Racing, but we're going to talk about why he's not driving for Rick Ware Racing. But Cole Custer is definitely in a very interesting position because he's going to have to really step up to the plate heading into 2023. And I think he's going to have a good chance of doing that. I think the fact that there are some guys like Ty Gibbs not going to be in Xfinity because he's going to be a Cup, Joel Allmendinger, Noah Gragson being a Cup as well next year. I think that Cole Custer will be one of the favorites, and I think he will be a championship 4 threat and will at least win 5 or 6 races next year, or maybe even more heading into 2023. That being said, though, no surprise to be driving the 00 car and wishing him the best of luck heading into 2023 because he's definitely going to need it. Hopefully he's going to do really good heading into 2023. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 2023 free agents. Now, basically, I believe it was TSJ Sports' Peter Strada who put out a report yesterday about 2023 potential free agents, and he's got 5 drivers who could be potential free agents heading into 2023. These 5 free agents are Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, Alex Bowman, and Ross Chastain. Let's first talk about Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick's in a contract year, and I would think that there's a very good chance and possibility that Kevin Harvick will retire at the end of 2023. A lot of indications are maybe Ryan Preece will move to the 4 car for 2024. That is a potential possibility, but Kevin Harvick is going to be a free agent. Martin Truex Jr., who of course will be returning to the 19 car in 2023, he also is going to be a free agent. And it's possible he could retire at the end of 2023. It's a year-by-year basis at this point for Martin Truex Jr., so we don't really know. Denny Hamlin is also under a contract year heading into 2023, as FedEx is also under a contract year, according to reports from Austin Kenseth and Adam Stern. So we know that Denny Hamlin is also under a contract year, and it's possible he could leave Joe Gibbs Racing. Alex Bowman, he's also under a contract year. Bowman is Fallon and Bowman are both under contract years, and we'll see if they end up re-signing. And Ross Chastain, shockingly, is also under a contract year. That's a name I expected to be basically already signed for long-term future. But I think a lot of it is due to when it comes to the TV deal. Now, I don't think I think here's what's going to happen. So I think Harvick's going to retire. I think Mark Jr. retires. I think the other three stay at their teams heading into 2024. So I think Denny Hamlin, Alex Bowman, and Ross Chastain are all going to remain in their teams heading into 2024. I just don't see any changes happening for those three drivers, and it's going to be definitely interesting to see for sure what happens when it comes to silly season, but those are the 5 drivers that are the big free agents going into 2023. Silly season, I don't expect to be as crazy in 2023 as I initially thought. I think there are some changes that will happen, but we'll have to wait and see what happens for heading into 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about road courses and short tracks. Now, I haven't talked about this on the channel, but there was a report that came out from jski.com talking about potential changes to short tracks and road courses. Steve O'Donnell was on the Stacking Pennies podcast, and basically he talked to the guys there, and he says that the Garage 56 project could lead some changes on the short tracks and road courses. What this has meant is their hopes is that they can fix the challenges when it comes to the short tracks and road course products on the racetrack. If you watch any sort of NASCAR Cup Series racing on the short tracks and the road courses in 2022, those races, outside of a few of them, have been kind of mediocre at best. It is very, very difficult to pass because of the dirty air that comes behind the cars. The hope is, with these changes to the car, it can basically fix and basically give them more. The hope is, and what I would love to see when it comes to changes, is increase the horsepower. I think 670 horsepower on short tracks is very, very low. I think they need to be able to go up to 750 horsepower. If they could, go up to 800 horsepower. That's one change I'd like to see. Same for the road courses. I think it'd be very simple to do it. You can make some changes. I understand that there are engine issues that have come into play when it comes to this, but whatever changes they can fix the short track and road course product, the better I think it's going to be for NASCAR, and just also continue fixing the rear of the car for safety reasons. But regardless, whatever changes that they are going to end up fixing, they need to end up fixing it because they could become major problems. And we don't want the road course and short track product to have issues. Like I said, near the end of the season, there were some good short track races. I thought Marza was a very solid racer at the end of the year, but the spring race was very, very bad. So they need to be able to find a way to make those short track races a lot better, especially in colder temperatures, and hopefully the product can be better heading into 2023 when it comes to that. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but hopefully whatever they're planning to do, they can fix some of the issues of the short tracks and the road course products. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Phyllis Newhouse. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern last night that, according to him, entrepreneur Phyllis Newhouse is looking at getting into NASCAR as a team owner, which would make her among the first black women investors in NASCAR history. He continues by saying that she has both talked to big teams about investing in ID Charter to start a new one. Phyllis Newhouse is a very rich lady. She served in the United States Army for, I believe, 24 years and has a lot of entrepreneurial experience and owns multiple companies. We have seen over the last few years, we have seen new team owners come into sport that haven't really been associated with NASCAR in the past. You think about Michael Jordan, who now owns 2311 Racing. You think about Pitbull, who is a co-owner of Trackhouse Racing. You think about other people that have been talking about coming into the sport and other individuals. And I think a lot of that is due to Denny Hamlin, who's really helped out with that. This could be a really, really big story. Now, what team could she own? There is a possibility she could own a team maybe like Richard Childress Racing. I did some investigative digging, and she actually follows Austin Dillon on Instagram. Now, that may not mean anything in the end, but that could mean that she maybe could become like an agent or something for Richard Childress Racing. It is very possible that could end up happening, but this could be really, really big for the sport if this does end up happening. But the biggest hurdle for her is going to be the cost of the charters. Charters right now, as has been reported as of recently in the last couple of weeks, that they are around $30 million. That is a lot of money, and a lot of teams are going to have to spend that kind of money if they're going to want to buy a charter. And we're going to be talking about that at the end of the episode, why this could end up being a problem. A lot of these teams are finding out the investments of these charters don't really have a lot of profit, and that's why Junior Motorsports has stayed out of getting into Cup on a full-time basis. Now, there's been some conversation that they're still eyeing 2024. We've had it up back and forth conversations Junior Motorsports has had about trying to get into Cup around 2024, but we'll have to wait and see in that area. And we've already heard that Nice Motorsports has shown some interest in maybe giving Carson Osbar some starts. We don't even know if Carson will be returning to Nice Motorsports in 2023, but I would think he will be returning there next year. But if she comes into sport, I think that's going to be really, really big because she brings a lot of that investment money and brings that experience in. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to this, but it would be definitely cool if Phyllis Newhouse does enter the sport. Just another person in the growing list of people and influential figures that are interested in joining NASCAR. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, we'll talk about RLL Racing RFK near the end of this episode, but we need to talk about Hailie Deegan, about her future in NASCAR. So, obviously, Hailie Deegan's future is very uncertain at the moment. She is still not signed for 2023, and we're getting close to December. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockris about 2 days ago on Monday that Hailie Deegan might be returning to the Truck Series in 2023. Now, it's possible she could go to Xfinity on a full-time basis, but it's not really likely at the moment, and a lot of talk is she will return to the Truck Series heading into 2023, with maybe the possibility of making some select NASCAR Xfinity Series starts. This is where issues kind of come up for her because Hailie Deegan, of course, is a Ford developmental driver. A lot of talk had been that maybe she would go to Xfinity Series and drive full-time for SS Greenlight Racing or drive full-time for Stewart-Haas Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But we know at this point that Cole Custer is going to be driving a 00 and Riley Herbst is driving the 98 car. And SHR has their lineup filled up for 2023. So that's off the table. She could go to SS Greenlight Racing, but they do have an alliance with RFK Racing. And I'm not sure if Stewart-Haas Racing will be any more aligned with SS Greenlight Racing anymore. So that could hurt her. So it sounds like at this point her options are very limited going into 2023. I think that if she's going to remain in trucks, she's only got one option, and that's Front Row Motorsports. Front Row Motorsports would have to, though, if they're going to put her there, they would have to expand to 2 trucks because Zane Smith is going to be driving a 38 truck full-time in 2023, along with making select Cup Series starts. So she would have to drive a second truck in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. Now, I'm going to talk about Hailie Deegan for a second as well. Has she done good in the Truck Series? No, let's be for real. She only has 2 or 3 top 10s in her Truck Series career and has ran mid-pack. But I don't think that when she drove for DJR Racing, I don't think that team was the fastest organization. Yes, Ryan Preece did really good with the team in his select starts, but I think a lot of it has to do with his Cup Series experience, and Ryan Preece is a very talented driver. She actually last year in 2021 outscored Tanner Gray in the points by 1 position. She actually finished 17th or 18th in the truck points in 2021. Now, she did struggle in 2022, but did, like I said, have a couple top 10s. But she did make her NASCAR Xfinity Series debut in 2022 at Las Vegas and had a very impressive run, ran top 20 pretty much all day long, and actually ended up finishing in 13th position, which, again, is really, really impressive for Hailie. I think that Hailie Deegan should be racing full-time in Xfinity next year, but I don't think she's going to be in Xfinity next year on a full-time basis. But she needs to get Xfinity Series experience. I don't think the hype is completely dead for her. I think she still has an opportunity to really have a shot at still getting a really good ride happening. And I think that she needs to be with front. If she's going to have an opportunity to be in great equipment, she needs to be a front row probably next year. But again, SS Greenlight Foot SHR equipment, she do a really, really good job. It is very disappointing, though, that she won't be racing full-time in Xfinity likely next year. Very disappointing news, and most likely she'll be in the Xfinity Series, Cups in the Truck Series next year. Kind of disappointing, but not a major surprise going into next year, especially with the lack of rides that are available in Xfinity and the lack of 4 teams. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about RLL Racing. As it was announced on Monday that RLL Racing has formed a technical alliance with RFK Racing. This, of course, is first reported by Racing Boys Lee Spencer. According to the report, they will lease shop space with RFK and have technical alliance and engines with RFK Racing. This is a major, major story because we already know at this point that RLL Racing had a technical alliance for 2 years with Stewart-Haas Racing. But now this means that they are going to be forming up with RFK Racing to form an alliance. I think this is a good development for RLL Racing for a lot of reasons. This gets them more in the Ford pipeline and will hopefully be able to help out their organization heading into the 2023 season. Because RLL Racing is a team that has really struggled for the last couple years. But they did show a little bit of improvement, not major improvement, but they did take some big steps forward. Cody Ware improved his average finish from a 31.1, I think like a 28.6, which is a pretty big improvement from 2021 to 2022. And in 15 car times, showed some really big pace with guys like Joey Hand, Ryan Preece, among other drivers who did have some good runs with the RFK Racing group. So the hope is RFK is they can become much faster. We also, at this point, the RFK Racing and Brad Keselowski stated at Phoenix that eventually RFK Racing would like to have a 4-car stable. They will also, though, have an alliance going to 2023 with Front Row Motorsports and RFK Racing now. The hope is that they can get all the 4 teams together and form this alliance so that all 4 teams can work together very, very well heading into the 2023 season. Now, do I think this is going to turn RFK Racing into a great team? I really don't think so. I think that RFK Racing is going to improve a little bit with this technical alliance because I think they'll get faster engines, and they absolutely will be really fast on the super speedways next year. They'll probably be really quick there and have a chance of winning those races and probably be good on the road course as well, considering RFK Racing has shown a lot of pace on the road courses in 2022. They showed a lot of pace there, and they really improved. Keselowski and Chris Buescher was up front in a lot of those races. But going into next year, I'm not sure how big this will be. The hope is eventually I think that Ford wants to do something very similar to Chevy, because Chevy has all the teams aligned together, and you look how fast Chevy has been with their engine combinations together, Hendrick ECR engines combined together, and they've just been really, really fast. Chevy dominated this year, and they were the strongest manufacturer. Ford was a little bit behind. So they're hoping is eventually maybe also get Stewart-Haas Racing involved and have all these manufacturers, all of them together to team up and work together heading into the future. But regardless of what ends up happening with RFK Racing, I think this is a really good move for RFK Racing because it shows that they are committed to making moves. They've got a lot of series they're trying to support, and it shows that RFK wants to be a more competitive organization because there's a lot of jokes about RFK Racing and them being a team that really doesn't care, which I think they do care, but they need to start showing it a little bit more going into the future. That being said, though, I think this is a really, really good move for both parties, and I think it will help both teams going into next year and help Ford become a stronger team because RFK Racing showed a lot of progress through the end of the season, and RFK Racing hopefully will be able to do that and improve going into next year. I'm surprised we're still having technical alliances with the next-gen cars, and a lot of people say that we weren't eventually going to need alliances, but I think that alliances will eventually go away in the future. We'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the RTA and NASCAR. Now, if you've been following the story around the RTA and NASCAR, this has not been a very, very good story. And we've got a major development that came out last night. According to Adam Stern, Race Team Alliance is deepening its relationship with Wasserman to have the agency look into the possibility of holding RTA exhibition races, a big development that suggests NASCAR's best teams are exploring organizing their own events in the off-season. Now, these events, according to the article, will be non-sanctioned NASCAR events with no NASCAR officiating there, and these would basically probably be live on television as well. If you're following this story around the RTA and NASCAR, this all revolves around the TV deal. There's a TV deal that is coming up here in the not-so-distant future. The currently TV deal goes from 2015 to 2024, with Fox and NBC basically controlling it. The TV deal that's coming out is going to be one of the biggest TV deals expected to be in NASCAR history. And the RTA, which is the Race Team Alliance, for those who are unaware, they want a bigger piece of that puzzle. About a month or two ago, it was reported that basically RTA was getting very fed up and very, very frustrated with the answers that they ended up basically getting in recent weeks with NASCAR's business model. And they've reported basically it's been 8 or 9% of that money that has been going in. They're not even getting a huge chunk of the money, not even 10% of the money, according to their sales. NASCAR did by back then basically said that that is not really true. At this point, it's basically a game of chicken when it comes to this at this point. But this is a really, really big development when it comes to exhibition races. I think that there are two potential possibilities. One, this could lead to a legitimate NASCAR split, because they're talking about having these races as early as next offseason, not this offseason, but as early as next offseason. This could actually lead to a NASCAR split, which is not a good thing. Because if you're an IndyCar fan, you know about the IndyCar split between CART and IndyCar, and it ended up being very, very ugly. The Indy 500 had the 25-8 rule, and then, of course, the CART Series tried to do the US 500, and that ended up being a disaster. And IndyCar is still kind of recovering, and they still have not 100% fully recovered from that. They kind of have, but not have fully recovered. NASCAR cannot afford a split, and I'm very worried this could end up being a split. Now, we might all be over-exaggerating at this point, and this may overall not, after all, may not end up being a NASCAR split. But this could genuinely be a NASCAR split, and that would be a major, major problem for a lot of reasons. Also, are drivers going to be willing to want to do this? The NASCAR season is already long enough as it is. It's a 36-race schedule, and the season, of course, has the All-Star race, and then you have the Busch Light Clash. So the season is nearly a year long. Now, this would not be the first time that races have been held outside of NASCAR's control. We've done the Australian Christmas 500, as NASCAR Man has posted, and also Ned Jarrett hosted some races as well. But this is unprecedented, and this is not a good thing at all. And this is very, very concerning, especially when it comes to the TV deal. What I'm hoping this is that this is not a NASCAR split, and I'm hoping that they can find a way to get a TV deal done where the teams can get a bigger piece of the pie. The reason the teams want also a bigger piece of the pie, though, is because of the fact that they don't have to rely as much on sponsorship, and we don't have situations that are very similar happening to Kyle Busch, where M&M's left, and Kyle Busch lost his ride at Joe Gibbs Racing to Ty Gibbs, and Kyle Busch now driving for Richard Childress Racing, but he now has sponsors that are trying to flock him. And you have another situation that's going on with Denny Hamlin and why he's potentially going to be a free agent in the year, because FedEx may not resign. Now, it's possible that FedEx does get an extension and Denny Hamlin gets an extension because Denny wants to complete his career at Joe Gibbs Racing. But this is the kind of thing that they are trying to avoid, and they're trying to basically have more of the TV revenue coming in. The tracks right now, I believe, get 70% or 65 or 70% of the TV revenue at the moment in the TV deal. What the teams and the drivers want is a bigger piece of the pie. They can hire better pit crews. They can hire better drivers to drive these cars. So a lot of these guys are really good at the moment, and they can hire more talent to be behind the wheel of these cars. The fact that they're talking about having exhibition races, though, is extremely concerning, especially with the length of the schedule. And we've heard rumors and rumblings that they may expand the schedule to a 40-race schedule. At this point, I'm just hoping that they can get the situation resolved and they can fix this problem when it comes to the TV deal, because this is a major, major problem. If this does end up becoming an issue, because this could actually become a really big issue, then we may have a major problem on our hands going into 2023. And it definitely is really concerning. It's a really concerning situation that definitely needs to be resolved heading into 2023. And I hope it does end up getting resolved so that we can basically not have this issue come up in the long-term future. So this is really, really concerning, and NASCAR is in an unprecedented situation. This feels like 1994 a little bit. I don't think we're at that level yet, but I think we're going to get to that level at some point if NASCAR does not resolve this issue. So I hope NASCAR can resolve this problem and we don't end up having a split in the future where RT has its own series. Now, this may just be something where they're trying to get leverage with the TV deal, and it's possible, but this could lead to a NASCAR split, and I am very, very concerned about that becoming a potential possibility. So, that is for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as per me on Patreon as well. Links are below over that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about the situation with the RTA wanting to have exhibition races? Do you think this will lead to a NASCAR split? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about RFK forming an alliance with RFK Racing? Let me know in the comments below, and Hailie Deegan's future. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm not sure what's going to be coming. It'll either be like a team preview or maybe a silly season update on the channel. Then on Friday, we'll probably have a NASCAR news video if there's enough NASCAR news content and other content on the way. And then this weekend, we'll probably have the 2023 Cup Series predictions dropping on the channel. That should be coming out this weekend. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.